Piet, joining us now from Miami. He's a senior director at the National Resources and Infrastructure Practice at America's Market Intelligence. That is a market intelligence and research firm. Let's start with the release of the pastor. Should this actually help with the Trump administration? Is it going to dampen this relationship in some respects?
Well, that's been an area of contention between the U.S. and Turkey for a while now. I mean, Trump was adamant about asking for the release of this pastor, and Erdogan was not about to make a move in just abiding by demands from the United States on this issue. So obviously, the release of this pastor was a key of opposition that preventing any kind of a cooperation between the U.S. and Turkey, and the recent news should actually encourage us to thinking that we're going to have more conversation between the Trump administration and Erdogan into trying to find some common ground on a series of issues that goes from Syria to the trade issues, and also obviously this recent development with Saudi Arabia.
NBC News is reporting that this is part of a deal that was worked out on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Turkey, as you know, beset with economic problems. Do you think that's the driver? I know you're talking about a number of issues there, but could this ease the economic squeeze being put on Turkey by the United States?
Well, the rise of the increase of sanctions from the Trump administration on Turkey was actually the detonator that led to the decrease of the Turkish currency and the worsening of the economic situation in Turkey. So obviously, if we see more cooperation now between the U.S. and Turkey, that's going to be reassuring investors and reassuring the markets, and potentially, therefore, strengthening the lira in Turkey and the overall economic perspective for the Turkish economy. Yes.
Turkey's had a relationship that's really gone from bad to worse with Saudi Arabia. How will the Khashoggi case complicate that relationship?
Well, you have to understand where we're coming from on this issue. Saudi Arabia has always wanted to have a strong position regionally and silence any kind of contestation and disagreement, both internally with potential opponents, but also regionally and at the expense of Qatar, for example, which wanted to have its own voice and want to develop and its possibilities of entering its sovereignty in the region. Turkey, during the blockade of Qatar, Turkey kind of came to the support of Qatar, therefore going against the position of Saudi Arabia regionally, and that actually is now the starting point of more and more opposition between Ankara and Riyadh. Ankara opened a military base in Qatar at the strong disagreement of Riyadh, and we have a series of more and more economic links between Turkey and countries that Riyadh has always been and has been more adamant about trying to silence and trying to lessen their influence regionally. So we do see here this constant opposition between Ankara and Riyadh that is probably at play here also today about the Khashoggi case right now.
Okay, so take it further. Where does it go?
Well, here, first of all, we need to wait and see what are the evidence in terms of what happened with Khashoggi himself when he actually walked in the consulate. Then the question becomes, what is the next step in terms of geopolitics? The United States, for a multitude of reasons, have always backed Riyadh during the Trump administration. That goes most specifically because of a series of armed deals. Washington is happy to sell north of $100 billion of weapons to try to allow Saudi Arabia to enforce its will in different theater of operation, especially Yemen. The position right now is, will the U.S. move away from Riyadh and try to work on more international cooperation on this case? Because what happened right now with Khashoggi being silenced and potentially murdered in the Saudi consulate is absolutely in opposition with what the U.S. should be standing for in terms of freedom of speech and the possibility of journalists to engage in analysis that might be in opposition with foreign countries. So the next step is to see how we're going to see a move from the United States towards Ankara and away from Riyadh, and therefore being able to pressure Riyadh into making sure that they actually move away from authoritarianism and the impossibility of working jointly with other countries and rather enforcing their own will regionally, internationally.
It'll be something we'll be watching. Remi, thanks so much for your analysis.